Right, welcome to my first ever YouTube. I haven't done this for a while, being in front of a camera, so you'll just have to excuse me if the first one's not very good. So I thought I'd start off with a selection of veg that you might have left over in your fridge that you could use as a basis of a soup or as a sauce that you could then top with pastry, dumplings, like a savoury scones. So it's quite versatile. So what I'm going to do first off is show you how to prep all the veg very quickly, and you don't need an awful lot. Now I'm gearing this for NEA2, whereby you're just doing it for 2 portions, so you don't need huge amounts of anything. So I'll start with the broccoli first, as that's nearest. Always rinse everything to make sure it's nice and clean. And what we want to do is just chop these into reasonable sized pieces. Alright, they all want to be a similar sort of size. Now all this can all just go in together, so I'm just going to pop those in. Now going back to my O-level days, it was called, I think we're trying to create a mirepoix of veg. So it's not fine dice, it's sort of slightly chunkier than that. But we want all the pieces to be of a similar sort of size. So I should just pop the little corns in. And again, you know, it's really up to you what you put in. What I'm trying to do is replicate a very nice pie that I ate recently in Whitby. And it was like a country vegetable pie, and it was absolutely delicious. So I decided when I got home I'd try and replicate it. So I tried to remember all the vegetables and things that were listed on the recipe. So here we've got some thin beans or French beans. Just chop those up into small bits. Onion, just got a half of an onion. Always leave where the root has been, leave that little end on so that it all keeps it together. Slice down. Now we want this sort of fairly fine dice, you don't want great big bits of onion in it. So the finer the better. Alright, now again, if you think that that's probably enough, I'm not going to put it all in, I'm just going to put about half of that in, so a quarter of an onion, because I'm also going to use a small piece of leek that I've got left over. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to chop that in half that way, and then I'm going to slice down. If you want, you can always maybe slice those in half again, but I'm just going to pop those in like that. Again, you've got, you know, another onion flavour, but this is a lot milder. In fact, I think I'll just put a little bit more of that in. And that can go in. A little bit of cauliflower. Again, I'm just going to chop that up. And you'll find some of these veg tend to break down during the cooking process anyway. quarter of a pepper, any colour pepper that you might have left over. Again, thinly slice, and then put all those thin slices together. And dice. Again, similar sort of size. I sometimes quite like, when I eat out, often have the vegetarian option, and I mean you can even make this into, you know, really a vegan option, as long as, you know, if you were making whatever you were making to put on the top of it didn't contain any animal product or milk, any butter or your margarine. Right, carrot, slice in half. Always make sure that things like that, and they're quite firm, make sure that you've got a flat base to work on. So I'm going to slice that down now. Now if that, you think that's a bit too thick, then just make those into sort of more even sized pieces. Again, do plenty of bridging, keeping your fingers well out of the way, clawing, tucking your fingers in, and again just chop the slightly bigger pieces up and then put them all together. And you can cube those. Alright, it's much easier to keep everything nice and neat like this. You know, you get people doing random cross chopping, but then you get big chunks and small chunks, and it's much nicer when you've got them sort of all even sized. Then we have our celery. Again, don't need too much of this. Cut it into sticks, and then again dice across. Gives a really nice flavour. And just as a piece of information, it takes more energy to digest it, celery, than because it's very low in calories. So you use more digesting it than you do actually eating it. And then finally, courgette, again, bridge, turn that over so it's flat side down. And chop that. Again, if you want to chop them into smaller batons, you can do. And with all these different vegetables, you've got lots of lovely flavours, different flavours, and also different textures. Soft textures, firm textures. Celery, a bit sort of fibrous. Put those together, and again now when you do your exam work, you haven't got time to, you know, start it off and add one veg and then add another veg. When I made this the other night, I just popped it all in together. Now if you're wanting to cut down on the amount of oil, then don't use oil, or just use a very small amount. I'm just going to put a little bit in there. And what you can do, once that's started to sweat down, I just add either a little bit of vegetable stock, and then put the lid on tightly. You'll notice that I've used a fairly sort of deepish pan here, just so that you can see it all quite clearly. But all that should sweat down, and it'll be really nice. So I'm going to put that on to cook, and once that's cooked, I'll show you what to do with it afterwards. Right, I'm back again. So we've sweat this down. Put it on really high, but don't forget about it. Once it's got up to heat and it's starting to steam, turn it down and add a little bit of water to create more steam, so it actually cooks in the steam. Then, if you've got a non-stick pan, do remember either to use something wooden or plastic in it. And I'm just going to drain that away. Whatever liquid is left in the pan, you can add that to your sauce if you're going to make a sauce. Now, if you were making a soup, all you would do is you would add your stock to this. And if you wanted to make it slightly thicker, you could add some cubed potato, which would thicken your soup up quite nicely. And failing that, if you didn't want to use potato in it, you could sprinkle a little bit of flour on it, a bit like creating a roux. Cook that through, and then add your stock. So I'm just going to get the rest of that out. Already it smells really nice, and it doesn't matter if there are maybe the carrots still al dente, because it'll carry on cooking if you were to, you know, heat it up with your stock in to make a soup, or if you're going to make a sauce like I am in a minute, it'll carry on cooking in that. And whatever you happen to use that lovely pie filling, your vegetable pie filling, in when you cook your pie or whatever in the oven, it'll carry on cooking it as well, so it'll all be thoroughly cooked. So I'm just going to drain those juices off into my measuring jug. Return that pan. It's not essential to wash it. And into that I'm going to put, it's about 25 mils of oil. If you want, you can use, you know, plant-based margarine, but I mean it's all going to melt down anyway, so I tend to use oil. And I'm actually going to show you how to make a roux, but again, if you're not very good or you tend to create a lumpy sauce, then you can do an all-in-one. Now again, make sure that you've got, you know, something wooden. You can actually get plastic whisks. I think I might treat myself to one. So put the heat on. Now get this on low. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to add the same amount of flour as I did the oil, so about 25 grams, and I'm just going to stir that around. Now this is making a roux, so you want to mix it into a nice paste, and you want to start again only at very low. You want to just cook that through, so it starts to cook the starch. And by cooking that starch, you'll hopefully not get a lumpy sauce. as you heat it, the starch grains swell and they will start to absorb the liquid. So if you don't get a roux like that, it means that you've either weighed too much flour out or you haven't got enough oil or fat in there. So, you know, you adjust it accordingly. So to that, now it's up to you. I'm actually going to do half milk. And again, if you were doing this for a vegetarian, you would use either rice milk or almond milk, or I wouldn't use maybe coconut milk because it's got quite a distinctive flavour, and it tends to mask everything else. All you get is the flavour of the coconut. So I want about half a pint of liquid because I've got 25 grams of fat and 25 grams of flour. I've got some vegetable stock and I've got some milk in there. Now the stock powder that I use to flavour that is that, alright, bouillon powder. Vegan, suitable for vegans, and it's got less salt and it's gluten free. Obviously that's no good if you know, the fact it's gluten free, that's fantastic, but the fact is we've got gluten in the flour, so you know, you'd have to adjust that accordingly as well. Maybe use something like corn flour. Right, so now I'm going to just add the liquid and I'm just going to stir that round. Alright, until it's absorbed it. Then I'm going to add a tiny drop more. Don't add it too quickly. Because otherwise you'll get a lumpy sauce, and sometimes I actually remove it from the heat whilst I'm doing that because I don't want all the liquid to evaporate away. But you can see now you're getting sort of like a really thick sauce and a smooth one. Keep scraping everything down here. You can't rush this. And if you're rushed for time, then all you would do is just put all the ingredients together into your saucepan and just whisk it. And just keep whisking it all the time. Again, start off on a low heat and build on that. And as it all sort of amalgamates together and gets nice and smooth, then you can up the heat, but keep stirring all the time. Right, I'm gonna just going to put that back on to the heat. And I'm going to pour the rest of the liquid in. Just make sure that all the stock's mixed in. Again, make sure that you get all that paste off your utensil. Now to that, I'm going to add some flavouring. I'm not going to add my cheese because that would overcook, but I'm going to put a little bit of mustard in there, and that will enhance and bring out the cheesy flavour once I've added my cheese. But you don't add your cheese until the sauce is cooked through. Right, and as that gradually heats up, and you can see now that it's starting to thicken, so the starch grains will start to burst and absorb that liquid and thicken it. But you've got to keep stirring really well, make sure you get it right round the edge. And we want to cook that flour out. It will have partially been cooked out through cooking the oil and the flour, making that roux, that paste right at the very beginning. Alright, and as that starts to thicken, you can then increase the heat. If you think it's cooking too quickly, you know, you're the one in charge, turn it down. You can see how much thicker that is getting and how smooth it is. And you want to create a really nice shiny sauce. If it looks sort of dull, it means that you haven't cooked the flour out properly. So you just cook it out a little bit more. Now I don't want that to catch, so I'm just going to turn that down now. But that looks just about right. So this is made about 300 mils of sauce, which is more than enough for what you would need it for. Just going to give that a last burst of heat. There you go, you see all the bubbles are just breaking the surface. Make sure it's not catching anywhere. Right, at this point in time, I'm going to turn that off now. I'm going to add my black pepper. Don't need to add any salt because there'll be some seasoning in the bouillon powder, and also there'll be salt in the cheese that I'm adding. So I'm going to add the cheese, and remember, you add the cheese off the heat, so no heat, because otherwise that would just go into a really oily mess. The heat from the sauce will melt the cheese really nicely. And then what you can do, you can return that. Give that a nice stir. If you wanted to add any herbs at this stage, you could do. I've got a little bit of thyme. You don't want anything that's sort of too overpowering. Or you could put maybe some mixed herbs in there. And that makes a really nice base for a pie. So you could put that into a casserole, you could put mashed potato on it, or crushed potatoes. You could make up some dumplings, or you could make up some cheesy scones and put them on. Or you could allow that to go cold, make up some pastry, and you could put it, you could either make a pastry pie, or you could make pasties with it, vegetable pasties. So I'm going to very carefully pour that into there. Now if you know, were making this in real time for an exam, you'd probably, and you wanted to make a pasties, you would really need to let this go cold, because if you're shaping your pastry and then putting, you need your filling to be reasonably cool so that it doesn't mess with your pastry. But anything else, like if you're making some sort of cobbler with scones, or putting dumplings on, then you can put them on whilst it's still hot. Alright, and that just smells absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'll make something later to show you what you can do with it. Right, I'm going to finish a cobbler off. I'm going to show you now what you can do with that lovely creamy cheesy vegetable mixture that I made yesterday. I've divided half of it into a small casserole dish, and now I'm going to make some scone cobbler topping for it. So in there I've got 125 grams of mixed flour. So I've got half wholemeal self-raising flour and half white self-raising flour. To that I've added also half a teaspoon of baking powder to give it that extra bit of rise. If you wanted to, you could put some sun-dried tomatoes in there, you could put some cheese in there, but I'm going to, once I've rolled it out, I'm going to put my cheese and roll it up a bit like a Swiss roll. So to that I then added about a quarter of that amount, so about 30 grams of butter, margarine, and you mix it until it looks like fine dry breadcrumbs. Again, if it was in an exam situation and you've got access to a mixer, then liquid, you know, pop it in the mixer to breadcrumb it. I've got 60 mils of milk. and it's up to you. You could use your bouillon powder again to add that sort of savouriness, some miso, or in this case I'm putting a little bit of pesto. So I'm going to mix that round. I'm just going to make, don't add it all, and make sure that you go all the way round. Give that a quick mix. Right, and then add some more. You can always add more, whereas you can't obviously take it away. Stir around with a round bladed knife. Now you can see that's starting to form large lumps. So I'm just going to press that against the side of the bowl. Clean my knife off, and I'm going to get my hand in there and knead that together. We'll just bring it together. Try not to handle it, overhandle it or overwork it. So use the dough to clean the bowl out. Always get rid of whatever you finish using, so that you're always working in a fairly tidy space. A little bit of flour down. Now your rolling pin, and now we want to just gently roll this. Now although we're making like scones for the top, we're actually going to roll it out slightly different. If you were making scones, you would make them at least sort of 2.5 centimetres thick. Well, because we're going to roll this up like a Swiss roll, we don't need to do that. We want to roll it so it's sort of quite thin. So we want a nice rectangle. Try and roll it nice and evenly. And if it's slightly going out of shape, then just stop and reshape. And you don't have to press or roll, you can always just press a little bit to even the shape out. I think that is about right now. Just give it one more roll that way. And I'm going to turn that around like that. Right, now here again you can add some more flavour, and I'm just going to put a little bit of pesto on there. Again, it could be green pesto or red pesto or sun-dried tomato paste, and I'm just going to spread that quite thinly all over. And then onto that I'm going to sprinkle some grated cheese. I've done a mixture. I've done, although it's the same cheese, I've done some coarsely grated and some finely grated. So again, you don't have to put too much on, just a thin layer. And just like you do your Swiss roll, and you can roll them up quite loosely so that you allow space then for them to expand. And then chop them into evenly sized pieces. So if you find half, and then half again, so now you can see you're getting that sort of 2.5 centimetres, the same sort of depth as you would normally cut a scone. And then what you do is you pop those in around the edge of the dish. Pressing them into your sauce with the vegetables in it. Oh, that's just about right. Then with the milk that you've got left over, flavoured with the pesto, you can just give those a bit of a glaze. And then they're ready to go in the oven. Right, just going to clear up that. Now I'm going to make some short crust pastry. So the amount that I've got in there is again half plain flour, half wholemeal flour. And I've got 75 grams of wholemeal flour, 75 grams of plain flour, and to that I've then added half that amount, so it's always half fat to flour. So let me think, 150, so that would be 75 grams of butter, or you can have half and half, lard and margarine. It really is up to you what you put in there. So again, I'm going to add some more flavour by adding pesto to the water. So 150 grams, that is 4, 5, 6, so it's about 6 or 7 dessert spoons of water. It works out, it's about a teaspoon to a dessert spoon of liquid to every 25 grams of flour. And again, just as the same as I did with the scones, add some, give it a mix around so that you're not just putting it in one place. We just want a just pliable dough. We don't want it too soft because otherwise you'll have really hard pastry. So that's about right. Again, as you stir it round, it should start to form larger lumps. I'll get rid of that. Bring that together. Alright, again, try not to overwork it. And then pop that out onto your floured board or your floured surface. Always pop your dishes and things to soak. Put some cold water in there and maybe some fairy so that it makes it easier to wash up when you go back to it. So again, a little bit of flour down, and with the other half of my lovely sauce mixture, I put that into 2 small oval baking dishes, little pie tins. So I'm going to divide this in half. I'm going to work each one separately. Again, don't roll straight away, just press down. And remember, they're oval, so we don't want it to be much bigger than that. Or we want it that sort of a similar shape to that. We do want it just slightly bigger, and I'll show you the reason why in a minute. Right, nearly there. So it just wants to be a tad bigger all round. And it wants to be about probably ½ centimetre thick for a pie crust, or thereabouts. Maybe not quite, just slightly less than ½ centimetre. So I'm going to take my knife, I'm keeping it sort of straight, I'm going to take that away. Right, now it doesn't matter about this bit, whether it's thick or thin or whatever, but we want to form a rim around the pie dish. Obviously some pies have a pastry bottom, but I'm just going to put a crust on this. Pastry is not the healthiest thing obviously for you, but it's great comfort food, and I love a nice pie. So I'm quite happy if it doesn't have the crust on the bottom, because it'll probably only be soggy once you've finished cooking it, but just to have a really nice pie crust, it's just delicious. So I'm going to pop that on there very carefully. And all you do is just making a pastry rim for your top to fit on. Now sometimes when I'm making a pie, if I've got some cooked potato left over, I will actually slice up some potato just to put a nice layer on top of the pie. for the sole reason of keeping the pie crust up and stopping it falling in and maybe making your mixture go, your pastry go soggy. If you were doing a large pie, you can always use a pie funnel. So I'm going to press that round there like that. That's perfect. I'm not going to do anything more to that. I then get the water and I'm just going to moisten the edge of the pastry again. I actually put a little bit of oil on the inside of these pie tins before I actually put the mixture in, just so that it doesn't cook in it and it will come out nicely. So pop that round. Now that then should be the perfect size of your tin. And press that on there like that. Then what you do is you get the back of the knife, not the blade of the knife, and you just go round and you just trim that off, trim off the excess. There's just nothing quite as satisfying as making a pie. I love it. And then if you want, you can just knife the sides up. As long as you're not using a sharp blade, it's alright to use the cutting side. It's only a table knife. And you're creating like a flaky, the effect that you would get if you were using flaky pastry. Out of all the pastries, this is probably the healthiest pastry because the amount of fat to flour is half. And if you're trying to be a bit healthier, you can always just reduce it just slightly more. But if you're making puff and flaky and rough puff, then you're talking 3/4 or the same amount of fat to flour in the case of puff pastry. Right, so that is that. You'll then make a couple of slits in the top of the pie to allow the steam to escape. Oh, I know what I was going to do. It's too late now, but I can do it on the next one. What you can do, I had a spare egg yolk. So what you can do is, before you actually put that down over the pie, just put a little bit of egg yolk on the underside, and it will just stop your top going soggy. It's also a good idea if you're making a tart case, and sometimes I will, if it's a quiche and you're baking it, the filling and the tart together, the filling and the tart case together, to stop it getting soggy, you act like it creates like a waterproof barrier. So once I've done that, I can then get in fact, what I think I'll do now with a savoury pie, you would glaze it with a bit of beaten egg. So I'm going to use a bit of that yolk with a bit of milk. So that I get a nice golden finish. And if you've got lots of time to spare, then you can, put some leaves, or you can decorate the top of your pie. And also you can put a decorative edge either with a fork, or you can go round just pushing that out against the end of the knife blade, just so that you get a pretty edge, fluted edge. And then you'll pop that onto your baking tray. So much easier to put everything actually on a tray, because then it's easier to pop in and out of the oven quite safely. I'm going to stop that now, and I shall finish that, and then the next time you see them, they'll all be cooked. Et voila! All done, all cooked, all out of the oven. You notice with this veg pie, I got my cutters out. If you've got the time, you can, you know, pretty it up. These take about 20 minutes on about 200 for about the first 5 minutes, and then I reduced it. And if you find that the pastry is still not sort of firm enough, then just lower the temperature and keep it in there just a little bit longer until it goes nice and golden. And then you can serve it with some green vegetables. Don't need any potato, because we've got the carbs provided by the pastry and the scones. And if you wanted some meat to go with the pie, then you could always serve a nice, you know, chicken portion, even a piece of fish, whatever sort of protein food that you'd like to serve it with. So I hope I've made that seem quite simple and easy and straightforward. So happy cooking.